everybody, and welcome back to the Sideline Eye podcast. You're welcome to our preview show, and we're looking ahead to Armagh's quarter-final clash against Cavan this Saturday evening. I'm delighted to be joined by Cavan legend Seanie Johnston, and he's going to give us the run-through on the feeling in Cavan building up to this game. Seanie, Cavan, I'm sure they're confident heading into this game. It's in Breffni Park, and I had Darren Kieran on the show the other day, and we spoke about Armagh having a poor record in Breffni Park. Cavan, they're coming in off the back of league success. They're going well under Mickey Graham. What's the feeling in Cavan? How much are they looking forward to this game?
Yeah, I think the feeling is majority is excitement, Sean. We had Monaghan and Tyrone last week. This is going to be another big game. I think they're expecting a bumper crowd in Breffni. I think there'll be, at Armagh Antrim, I think there was 10,000 with probably a pretty poor Antrim following. So Cavan are going to bring a big crowd. Armagh will always bring a good big crowd. So there'll be close to 20,000 people in Breffni. It's an unbelievable amphitheatre in that type of atmosphere. So the place is going to be bouncing on Saturday night. Two teams that know each other pretty well. They would have played in an Ulster semi-final in 19. Have probably gone in different trajectories. But yeah, I think it's going to be a serious atmosphere. It's not going to be for the faint-hearted in terms of what's going to happen on the field. There's a lot of pressure on Armagh. But Cavan will be quietly confident. Armagh are obviously going in favourites after being in Division 1, but the reality of the situation now is both teams are going to play their football in Division 2 next year, so there isn't that much between them.
There's pressure on Armagh, definitely. Seanie, there is every Ulster Championship for the last, 10, 15 years. There's pressure to get over a big team or to get over a strong challenge. There's maybe a wee bit of pressure on Cavan too. I would say not as much. The fact that Cavan have to get to an Ulster final to get into the All-Ireland series, it's probably a must win for both teams, but probably the pressure's on Armagh that wee bit more. Would that be fair to say?
Yeah, I think it definitely is. Like last Ulster final in 2008 for a county of, the history in between those years of say 98 all the way up, blah blah blah, when they were dominating the Ulster Championship to go whatever that is now, 15 years without an Ulster final appearance. And it's not going 15 years without the hype of being in an Ulster final appearance. They just haven't been able to get there. There've been serious hype around this group of players for probably in Kieran's tenure. I think he started in 2015, and obviously he's building something and did a very good job throughout the league structure. But over the last probably 3-4 years, there's been an anticipation growing. It probably started growing more last year due to their performances in the qualifiers by, getting that victory over Tyrone and then going into Croke Park and being involved in a classic with Galway. But yeah, they haven't been able to get it done in the Ulster Championship. They talk about taking a big scalp. I'm not so sure they'll see this as being a big scalp. They should, but I'm not so sure that they will, which is something that may come back to haunt them on Saturday night. But this is a game that Cavan have been waiting for a while now. They would have looked at this draw, and it's probably harder for Armagh going. They still have to focus on Antrim, but Cavan are probably sitting back going, well, yeah, we're 99.9% sure that we're going to play Armagh. I think this draw come out around the 15th of October 2022. So they're sitting there for 6 months knowing that D-Day is coming on Saturday. And I think they'll be very, very, very well prepared.
And on that, Seanie, once they were promoted from Division 3, I know they still had, I think, the 2 league games left and obviously a league final as well. What's the one? But they've had, say, 6 weeks now to just fully hone in on Armagh. And I know Mickey Graham and Ryan McMahon were both at the Armagh and Antrim game. How big of a benefit is that to Cavan that they have just, say, 6 weeks of just honing in Armagh, tactics, matchups, whatever they want, just focusing entirely on Armagh?
Yeah, it is a big benefit. Like knowing the current structure, they would have still been focused on trying to win every league game as well. And particularly, I think it was so important after winning their first 5 games to go and actually win the league final. People will probably kind of say, well, it wasn't that important. The main goal was to get promotion. Yes, it was, but it's hard to turn down the opportunity of winning a trophy in Croke Park and the confidence that can build into a group. That was something that this group of players and management would have definitely set their stall out. They would have been disappointed with their last 2 league games, albeit that they had already got promotion, or more or less it was nearly impossible for them not to get promotion after beating down in Breffni that day. But they really, really wanted to win that league final. They got over the line. They probably played quite poorly in the first half. They were very, very good the second half. won comfortably in the end by 6 points against the team that's hard to go and hammer in for Fermanagh, to be honest. I know Derry dispatched of them fairly easily at the weekend, but that's pretty unusual that they'll take a decent beating for Fermanagh. They're sticky and they're well set up and so on. But like I said earlier, Cavan have been priming themselves for this date in Breffni, knowing that Armagh were going to come to Breffni. They will back themselves in the white heat of battle in Breffni Park. As you rightly said, Armagh came in 16 to play Cavan in Breffni. Didn't go well for them. They played Donegal in 20 in Breffni. It went really poorly for them. So it's a ground that they haven't had that much luck. I think they won an under-20 All-Ireland there a good few years ago. But other than that, I think you said they've only won once in the championship in Breffni Park. So yeah, it hasn't been the happiest of hunting grounds, and here's hoping that doesn't change.
Yeah, the one that All-Ireland beat Mayo in 2004. So obviously the only links is Kieran McKeever was the captain of that team, and he's a coach now. You mentioned 2016, Seanie. That was the last time they met in Breffni Park in the championship. The last time Armagh won, the first and only time Armagh won in Breffni Park was in 2008. You were playing both them days.
Yeah.
What is it about Breffni Park to Cavan? Is it a Cavan's home patch? Is it a big advantage playing in Breffni Park for Cavan, or how do you see home advantage?
Look, I think it has to be. If you look at majority of sports, home advantage plays a key part. What the reason for that is, it's probably pretty hard to say. But, throughout the majority of field sports, American football, Premiership soccer, it holds serious value. So, you're used to your surroundings. Cavan would have played, they had 4 National League games at home. A lot of these players would have played up on 100 times in Breffni Park. They're just comfortable in the environment, where the majority of this Armagh team have probably played there once. You said even in 16, there was probably, I'm trying to think, Morgan was playing that day. Kieran McKeever is involved now. He was playing that day, but probably Ethan Rafferty could have been playing that day. There was not that many of them involved. Soupy Campbell was playing. But after that, they would have been there once against Donegal. Didn't go well for them. So they're not coming down with a huge amount of happy memories either. So, look, Armagh are going to be ready as well. And if they don't, they need to, I suppose, appreciate the importance of this game for them. And I don't, this is not me trying to they understand the pressure that's on them. They're talking about, and people are talking about winning Ulster titles for this Armagh group for a long, long time, and they haven't been able to get over round 1. I don't know how many Ulster Championship games this group has won, but it's not that high. They have serious quality in their side. They showed that in Croke Park last year. Like, they could have beaten Galway. They had their opportunities to beat Galway. They beat a lot of very good teams in the qualifiers. Like, they went back to back beating Donegal and Tyrone, which is something that's very, very difficult to do for any team. But they're after coming off the back of a relegation, which I think will hit them harder. I think for example, if I put Armagh and Monaghan in the same boat, I think that relegation hits Armagh harder than it hits Monaghan, because Monaghan have been there for so long. They're kind of decorated Division 1 team. If they slip to Division 2, would they be disappointed? Yes, they would, but I think they'd be able to recover. And what Division 2 allows Monaghan to do, for example, is not to have to peak for potentially every single game. In Division 1, to stay in Division 1, you have to be right there at every single game at an unbelievable intensity, at an unbelievable attitude. Everything has to be spot on to win games at Division 1 level. And Armagh have made no secret that they wanted to be in Division 1. They fought tooth and nail to try and stay there, and probably got the Roscommon game, to me, is the game that they probably really slipped up in. But yeah, Ulster Championship brings, as you know, it brings its own life to things. And it's very hard to play down the significance of this game for both teams.
Yeah, that's the big thing. And I remember talking, previewing the Donegal game last year in the first round of the championship, and that was off the back of a really positive league campaign, thinking this was a must-win, that they have to win it to sort of signify their intentions on the big stage. Like, it's okay doing it in the league, but you have to go and do it in the Ulster Championship. That was a failure, and I think as Armagh fans, we're just hoping that doesn't happen again. And I suppose on the relegation, Seanie, it would have hit the Armagh camp. I've no doubt it would have hit them hard. The fact that they tried so hard, and Kieran McGeeney tried so hard for years to get to Division 1, getting there, spending a couple of years there and getting relegated again, it was a backward step. But the fact that they played Antrim, they sort of got that blew away fairly quickly, I would imagine. And the fact that they got back on track against Antrim has maybe helped the mood in the camp, if nothing else.
Yeah, and like, again, it's also hard to realise the importance of having a match under your belt in Championship. you know, because it's different. No matter what people say, you can gear yourself up for National League games, but Ulster Championship is what we've been born and bred on. It's the cutthroat of our year. It's what you've been. You're not growing up wanting to play in a National League game. You're growing up wanting to play in the first round of an Ulster Championship game, or in front of 20,000 people in the athletic grounds, or in Breffni Park, or in Omagh, or wherever, Clonus, or wherever that may be. And they've had that experience now. They introduced one or two different players in. I think it was McPartlin that played. I don't know if that was his first game, but I hadn't really seen that much of him. He looked really good. So they've got a game under their belt. They've got a win under their belt. They're going in with a little bit of I suppose, idea of what that championship intensity is like, because like I said, you can play in National League games, you can play even in National League finals, but that championship and that buzz around that championship and that first ball and the energy around the stadium will be very different on Saturday night. So look, they've bounced back manfully from their relegation, but nothing that you wouldn't expect them to do. Like, you expect them to blow Antrim away at home. They did, but honestly, I think Antrim were really, really poor. Again, it's another game that Armagh went without a goal. They kicked 20 points. Antrim kicked 1-8. They had a couple of chances of getting another few goals too in the second half, Antrim, when they came out with a bit of life about them. But like, the reality for Armagh is they didn't score enough to stay in Division 1. A lot of their scores are around, I think they got first day out. What did they get? They got 13 against Donegal from what I remember. They got 12 against Roscommon. They got 16, I think, against Tyrone. They only got 1-5 against Galway. So they haven't scored as freely as this team has been for the last few years. Like, with Kieran's teams, you expect them to play free-flowing football. You expect them to have close to 30 shots a game, because I think he fully believes that if you get 30 shots a game, then you'll probably get 18 scores. So they've been attacking at will for the last 3 years. And to me, it looked like, and I watched them, I saw the Kerry game, I saw the Galway game, I saw the Roscommon game, and I saw the Tyrone game. And it looks like Tyrone game was a bit different, but in those other three games, they look to be playing definitely more defensive, particularly in that Kerry game where they're, and you can understand why with the likes of Clifford and Sean O'Shea in there. It's hard, they're hard to handle. But they definitely look to have changed tack slightly. Now, I know their management team has come out and taken this really, really badly, that people have said this, but the proof is in the pudding. They're not scoring as much as they did in the last couple of years. I think they've averaged maybe 13, 14 points a game in Division 1. I think if Armagh score 13 points at the weekend, they'll lose. So they need to find a way of getting to 117, 116, 117, which is getting you close to the magic number of 20, 21 scores if they're going to try and win this game, I think.
And on that change of styles, Seanie, do you understand it, that the fact that they have played gung-ho, they've went attacking, they've went in the front foot, and essentially it hasn't worked because of their record, and their record in Ulster Championship speaks for itself over the last couple of years. Do you understand maybe they're just taking it from a different angle this year? Okay, maybe Ulster football is a wee bit more defensive. You do have to be a wee bit more cautious, protect the ball a bit more. Can you see where they're coming from in the change of style?
Well, they got relegated.
Yeah.
But that's okay if they go on and win the Ulster Championship playing like that. Then I can understand it. But until then, until it's hitting you right in the face that this is the right way to go at the minute, well, no, it isn't the right way to go, because there's nobody going to sit there with a orange jersey on me and tell me they're content enough. Like, we had a good enough league campaign. We got 5 points. We beat Monaghan, and we drew with Mayo, and we beat someone else. I can't even remember who else to beat, but who else did they beat? Donegal, who are not in a great place. Monaghan in their first league game were down a lot of bodies. Then they looked quite good against Mayo, but they were 4 or 5 points down against Mayo with maybe 3 minutes to go. So there's nobody going to, sit there and say, oh, we're delighted with the way Armagh are going and we love the way that they're playing. But obviously Armagh fans won't mind if they go and win at the weekend, and then they're pushing on, and they'll be big favourites again. If they beat Cavan the weekend, they'll be favourites in the semi-final. But in every game Armagh play until the final, unless it's Monaghan, they're going to be favourites in every single game in the Ulster Championship unless they play Derry. So they have to be able to hold that tag, and the reality of the situation is they haven't been able to do that. So I don't know what's changed. I'm sure, knowing the caliber of people involved in their management team, I'm sure it's something that they've paid a huge amount of time to, but time will tell.
And Johnny, just talking about their attack and trying to get more scores and that, obviously Andrew Murnan and Rian O'Neill didn't play against Antrim, and we don't know what the story is with them.
You know, Sean. You know, surely you know now.
Well,
You can
fingers
give us
crossed.
a little bit of feedback here now, so I can bring something back.
Fingers crossed they're playing, but whether what we don't know is whether they're in from the start or not. I would assume that the them two boys, Charlie O'Burns and Connor O'Neill, are all on the 26th. But whether they're starting or not remains to be seen. But I was wondering, Shawnee, you were obviously in the management team with Mickey Graham there for a couple of years. Mickey's obviously a shrewd operator, and he's planning for Ian O'Neill and Andrew Murray, isn't he, from the start?
Absolutely, I'd imagine he's definitely planning for them at some point. But like, being honest, this management team would have those matchups in their head from, I think it was, I said, the 15th of October. They know, like, they know who's going to pick up these boys. And in fairness to the Cavan players, they are blessed with an athleticism and power. They're in serious nick, as are the Armagh players. And it's going to be an unbelievably physical battle, because both teams pride themselves on their size, their physique around the middle of the field, their powerful runners, their athleticism, and their ability to be able to break tackles and break lines. And like like I said earlier, it's not going to be for the faint-hearted. It is going to be a war of attrition. I don't think there'll be a meter given, or given or taken. So it's going to be extremely physical. If these boys play, Cavan will have matchups for them. The reality for Armagh is, like, I think if you pick their 7 National League games, and 6 of them, Rian O'Neill top scored. So without him, other boys are going to have to stand up, which did happen against Antrim. I think Turbot kicked 8 points against Antrim, and he's a player that I really like, and I think he goes under the radar because of Campbell, Grugan, O'Neill, and maybe one or two others. But I like Turbot. I think he's a very good player. I think he's a player that Cavan really, really need to keep an eye on. I'm delighted that he went really well against Antrim, because it means that now his name is popping up a lot more than it probably would have, because he's been in and out of the Armagh team, but he offers them something different. He's pacey, he's direct, he's got hands that honestly, as an inside forward, you die for. Like, he's serious hands for a guy that's not massively tall. But like, a lot of the big names in Armagh that you'll hear people talking about will be O'Neill. I like Grugan too. He's a very smart player, really, really good player. Murnan, people are talking about. But Cavan have bodies to pick those boys up, I think. It's the Grugan who's using this rather than using his his athleticism that some players have. He's a really smart guy. He's a player that I like a lot. And then you have Turbot, who's using that. I presume he's called Turbo for a reason, but he has gas about him. And he's someone that he's probably coming in with a lot of confidence after that Antrim game as well, which makes him dangerous. But yeah, I think Cavan match up well to Armagh.
And just on the matchups, Shawnee, can you give us a bit of an idea of who? I assume Faulkner would pick up Andrew Murnan if he starts to pull forward, and maybe Killian Clark going on Rian O'Neill. If Rian goes out the field, Clark would follow him. Or who do you think, if it was your opinion, if you were picking the team, who would you match up with?
Yeah, it's hard to know what Cavan will do. Like, if Rian O'Neill plays, and he'll float. Like, if you look at what Fermanagh had, Ultan Kellen played inside, but he floated as well. Porrick followed him everywhere, did an unbelievable job on him. But Cavan have bodies that can do jobs in the inside line, and the bodies that can do jobs out the field as well. So, look, the matchups will be key. I think if Murnan plays, probably Clark will pick him up if he goes in. Murnan's quite, I think Murnan's strength is in the air. He's not that unbelievably imposing in terms of, he doesn't look like someone that's lifted weights all his life, but he can spring, and he has a great pair of hands on him. And he seems to be somebody that Armagh players really look up to. Now, you can tell me if I'm right or I'm wrong there, but he really does seem to be a good lad around the squad. They seem to have a lot of time for him, probably to do it. I think he's come back from some horrendous injuries. So he's someone that's been around the Armagh squad for a while. But again, I think Cavan have the matchups in Killian or Porrick, whoever that may be, to take him on, and potentially take him the other way as well, and test out. The reality is, the Tyrone game is probably 4 or 5 weeks ago. If you haven't played a competitive game in 4 or 5 weeks at this level, there's a chance you're going to be blowing after 15 or 20 minutes. And particularly if this game is played at the pace and the intensity that I expect it to be played at. And Cavan would be silly not to try and exploit that. If Rian O'Neill and Murnan plays, and Charlie O'Burns, I don't know how much training they have behind them. then if you're Porrick and you're Killian Clark, you need to be taking those boys 50, 60, 70-metre runs and getting them into positions that makes them feel pretty uncomfortable.
And on the Cavan defence, so I just want to talk to you about Darren McVeety, because I know he's come back in this year and he had been playing in the half-back line. He played, I think he was centre half-back against Armagh in the McKenna Cup, and he kicked 3 points and was man of the match. So Armagh well warned anyway, because he was their best player in 2019 when they beat Armagh in the Ulster semi-final, but he was a forward that time. What has his influence been in the half-back line? How good has he been throughout the league? I know he was injured for a couple of games as well.
Yeah, I don't even think it's his influence throughout the National League. It's his influence in general. To me, he's in, and people will go blah blah blah. He's in the top 5 or 6 players in the country. He would make any single inter-county team in Ireland. And what makes him so special is that he's as good at 14 as he is at 6, or he's as good at 12 as he is at 5. So he can play in a majority of positions, which is such a boost for Cavan. So, you know, in the first round of the National League, Fermanagh decided to go toe-to-toe with him, to put a cornerback up to mark him, you know, try to track him all over the field. Then Cavan could switch him into wing forward, or they could switch him inside, and he offers serious threats wherever he goes. He's a phenomenal player. He's a phenomenal attitude to playing. He wants to be the best player, which makes him, you know, which to me, if you're going to be one of the best players, you have to really, really want to be the best player. And it sounds silly, but some people don't want to do the work to do that. He has no problem doing that. He trains exceptionally hard. He's got himself in unbelievable condition. He came back from 3 years away from the group when he was on his travels in Australia, and he just fitted in seamlessly. He's been man of the match in probably, you know, 70-80% of the games that he's played this year. He has a massive influence over the Cavan team, and he's just been such a boost back. It's great to have him back. It's great to see him back in blue, and you know, I expect him to have a huge influence on the game on Saturday evening.
If you were in the Armagh camp, Seanie, you're man marking him, aren't you? You have to, even if he's playing in the half-back line, you have to send maybe a Conor O'Neill or a Greg McCabe or somebody up into the forward line to mark him, because he's a playmaker from the half-back line too, isn't he?
Yeah, and they have a couple of choices to make what to do, like, you know, because the thing about that Cavan have now, they have size, like, and, you know, they can hurt Armagh with size. Now, Armagh have some big physical guys in their defence. They're going to have to probably, you know, we spoke about matchups earlier on. What are they going to do with a Grode McKiernan? What are they going to do with a Paddy Lynch? What are they going to do with a James Smith? What are they going to do with a Jerry Smith, who pound for pound is probably the best player in the Cavan team, and doesn't get, very like Grugan, nearly gets overlooked by other potential names who score more than him. But again, what an unbelievable player. So there's a huge amount of decisions to make for both management teams in terms of the matchups, and that's what makes the game so, you know, that's where you're kind of on the edge of your seat. You're going, okay, geez, with a minute to go, you're looking out and you're going, who's picking up Charlie O'Byrnes? Who's picking up Darren McVeety? Because it's not necessarily going to be, if Dara starts at 6, that Rory Grugan will be just sitting there at 11. Like, it's unlikely that'll happen. Charlie O'Byrnes goes to midfield. It's unlikely that whoever, you know, is named at 8 or 9 will pick him up for Cavan. So Charlie O'Byrnes is a player that Cavan are very, very aware of. You know, I expect Charlie O'Byrnes to come in for a welcome to Cavan in at about 2 minutes past 7 on whatever, is that 6:30 or 7 o'clock, with about 2 minutes before or after throw-in. I expect him to get a welcome to Breffni Park, because he's a good player. You know, and honestly, if he wasn't getting that, he should be looking, why am I getting that? Like, you know, he should nearly be, I want this, like, I want to go into battle here, because he has the attributes and the abilities. And at times in the games I watched him against Armagh, I think he's a slightly different player this year. I think there's more to him. I think there's a bit more cut and thrust to him. He was making really, really, really punishing runs that are really, really hard on the body, and he was carrying the fight for Armagh in a couple of the National League games, and you could see him then up to the crowd and he was pumped up. So I didn't really see that in him a couple of years ago, that he had that, you know, incredible desire to keep pushing. But he's a good player now. He's someone that Cavan need to look out for now.
You mentioned Cavan's physical size and physical power, Seanie, and I wanted to touch on this. The Antrim game, the couple of high balls they put into the square, they didn't get anything off them, but it's consternation when there's a high ball put in. And I was wondering, is there a possibility of a twin tower threat that Cavan could go with, maybe with McKiernan and Lynch inside? Just physically huge men, and McKiernan, he maybe doesn't have the work rate in him anymore to go out the field. He's been about a long time, while Lynch is a real handful in there. possibly matching up with Falker and McKay would be the two matching up, I would imagine, from an Armagh perspective. But just them two boys inside, that would be a serious threat if Cavan went with a tactic like that.
It would. And one thing I'll say on Grode, I'd write him off at my peril now, because he played very, very little National League football. He suffered a couple of niggly calf injuries. In that National League final was his first real start after just, he missed the first 5 games. He came in, he got a bit more game time the first day. Then he started against Antrim, and he started against Fermanagh. He started the National League final. Without doubt, look, rusty. He's had now 3-4 weeks. That guy is primed for championship. Every year he'll kick 3-4, maybe sometimes 5 points from play. He's a player that isn't appreciated enough by some Cavan fans, because he's judged at a different standard than everyone else because of his size and his physique and what he brings. But he's been an unbelievable player for Cavan for 10 years. And, if I was in his shoes, I would be relishing the prospect of, okay, everyone's talking about Darren, everyone's talking about Paddy, but maybe there's a little bit of a lack of respect there that, he has been Cavan's chief's marksman for the last 10, 12 years, and he will have a serious ambition and drive come Saturday night. But to answer your question, is there a chance of a Twin Towers? Yeah. Is there a chance of a Triple Towers? Absolutely, because James Smith can go in there. They have size everywhere. It's probably just if they had Thomas as well, we could have put all 4 in there and caused absolute havoc for yous. But look, when there's size in there, it's dangerous. You look at how Armagh got back in the game against Galway in the quarter-final last year. Like, it wasn't pretty. Like, let's lump all in there. Galway have a weakness in their full back line, well, in the goals and probably their full back line, and they got joy out of it. So it's something that Cavan will probably have to sniff out early on. Is the long ball an option? Are we getting something out of it? But what 1 or 2 long balls does is it withdraws Armagh. It brings their half back line to drop 5 yards further. It brings a midfielder to drop another 10 yards further, because they're aware that this threat is there. And then it allows Cavan to get the running game going and get their wee pop balls going, which they're very good at and have been working really hard on for probably 2 years now, or 3 or 4 years now. So, yeah, I think having that variety makes you more dangerous.
And Shawnee, just before I let you go, I'll have to ask you about Mickey Graham. What is it about Mickey Graham? What makes him so special? It just seems that success follows him everywhere, and he's got such a great tune out of this Cavan team over the last couple of years. Obviously, a couple of league titles, an Ulster title in 2020. What is it about him that makes him so good?
If I had a euro for every time someone asked me that, I'd be a wealthy man. He is. I tell you one thing that stands out. He really believes in the Cavan players. And, that sounds like it's a nothing comment, but it's so important. I think he believes that they are even better than they see that they are. He backs them 100%. He backs his players. He's there for them. He would do anything for his players, as would the Armagh manager. Yeah. So there's a very strong culture within both groups, I would say. And I don't know the Armagh setup, but I just know the manager, and I know what he brings, and there'd be a strong culture there. And it's the same within this Cavan group. Like, both groups have suffered serious setbacks, but they've stayed together. And there's a lot to be said for that. There's a lot of times that, you'd see counties and they start breaking up after 2 or 3 years. Well, this Cavan group has been together since 18 or 19 with Mickey, 19. The Armagh group has been together since 15 with Kieran, and they've lost very few players. 1 or 2 have drifted away. But, that says a lot about the culture and the management styles within the group, and it says a lot about the respect that the players have for the management. And, he's a winner. Like, he's won a lot of big trophies. He knows what it takes to win an Ulster Championship, and that's hard to do, and it can't be underemphasized, the importance of, a lot of your players having an Ulster medal and your management having an Ulster medal, because being there, done it, maybe not in the same environment as they would have liked, in terms of it wasn't Clonus with 28,000 people, but it meant every bit and probably more to Cavan people because of what was going on in the world at the time. So, look, they're not going in with an inexperienced group. They're not going in with an inexperienced management. They're well aware of the atmosphere that will be in Breffni Park on Saturday night. And, they've been in these environments before, and I just can't wait for it, to be honest, Sean. I think they're really going to, both teams are going to relish it. But I think for Cavan, because they will be written off, I don't know what the odds are, maybe but I'd say Armagh are pretty strong favourites. And that just is right up Cavan's alley now, I think.
I think it's Armagh's 1-2 and Cavan's 2-1 maybe. I think I've seen that somewhere. But Armagh favourites, not a great record in Breffni Park as we discussed. Seanie, how do you see it going? Who is going to win this game? I have a notion what you're going to say here, but you're say it anyway.
Yeah, but it's not out of bias. I honestly think Cavan will win, because I think Cavan have potentially better forwards than Armagh. Everyone talks about Armagh's forwards, and they talk for years that Cavan don't. Well, Cavan now have Paddy Lynch, Grode McKiernan, James Smith if he plays there, Jerry Smith, Darren McVeety potentially in their forward line. They're seriously well stacked in their forward line. And if Armagh are going in potentially without O'Neill and Myrne, and it weakens them. And I know they'll have them off the bench, but Armagh aren't getting scores out of that many scores, and I'm going to touch wood here in case this comes back to bite me. But Jamar Hall's not going kicking you 1-3. Now he's a great player, and you admire him because he works and he works and he works. Same with Callum Comiskey, and you need those sort of players. But they're going to be reliant, if O'Neill doesn't play, they're going to be reliant on Turbin, and they're going to be reliant on Grugan. And if they're stopped, then Armagh are going to get stuck on 13 points if they don't get a goal. And I think Cavan have enough firepower to kick 16, 17 points. And if they can get a goal on top of that, they're going to take a lot of beating.
Well, I hope you're wrong, Seanie, but we'll see how it pans out. That's in Breffni Park, Saturday evening at 6:30. It's on GA Go for anybody that can't make it. And of course, we'll be covering it with podcasts, previews, match reports and everything else that goes along with it, as well as the minor game this weekend and the hurling game on Sunday. Seanie, great to hear your thoughts. Thanks for coming on. Really appreciate it.
Sean, thanks very much for asking. Hope all's well.